What's up guys, it's bluetea-TCG back with another Vanguard video, and the subject of today's video is going to be some of the new cards we're going to get for Angel Feather and Premium in the upcoming P-Clan Collection set 2022, and how they're going to affect Angel Feather and Premium going forward. But first, I do want to go over a couple of notes and ideas regarding kind of the state of Angel Feather and Premium right now, and also about the build that I released in a deck profile a couple of weeks ago. If you haven't already checked that out, make sure to do so. The link for that will be in the description. But I do feel like Angel Feather is actually not bad at all in Premium, surprisingly enough. I was shocked to learn basically how resilient and how efficient the build that I presented in the deck profile was when I was playtesting against a couple of friends that play Highlander. I played a lot against Regalia as well. I played against Grand Blue, the Night Rose Beatrice deck that's been storming through Premium lately, and surprisingly the deck's actually done pretty well. I was not sure how the deck would perform, especially given the track record that Angel Feather has had in Premium in the past throughout GR as well. But I think Angel Feather is not in a bad position right now if you build the deck correctly, if you build around all the strengths that Angel Feather has in terms of being hard to kill and being explosive with all the crits that you can stack on Hamiel to make use of her guard restrict, as well as Boss's Sales guard restrict, as well as all of our utility with swapping no CLs and the ways we're able to just stick around and survive by means of Frail and our G Guardians. So I do think Angel Feather is actually in a pretty solid position right now to undertake a tier 2 position in the metagame. I know that's a bold claim, but we're going to talk more about this pretty soon here, especially with the new cards as they come into play. But I did want to just give you a little bit of a background into how Angel Feather is doing right now. Of course, the weakness lies in the deck's susceptibility to Denial Griffin. That's obviously been an issue with Angel Feather for a long time, but there's no exception here in terms of Denial Griffin does kind of thwart the plays that we want to make for this deck, for this clan in general. But I think we do have numerous ways to play around it, especially given all the toolbox that we have in our G zone. And with these new cards available, let's go ahead and go right into it now. We're going to talk about Zaphkiel first. So Zaphkiel, when I first saw her, I was like, okay, this card seems extremely good. It's like they really wanted to make Angel Feather have a really strong first impact stride, you know what I mean? And I think this card definitely does it. Let's go ahead and read through her skills so that we can understand what she does. So of course she has a standard stride step skill. We'll skip over that to save some time here, but I'm sure as you guys know already that she has an activated ability that's on the Vanguard Circle. Soft once per turn. The cost is merely discard a card from the hand. That is quite insane, to be honest. It doesn't cost any counterblast, and that's really a good sign. Just right off the bat, I'm hoping that means that we get to get some countercharge shenanigans on top of other things. But let's go ahead and read the rest of it. The cost is to discard a card from your hand, and you choose a total of up to 3 cards from your drop for circles other than your Vanguard Circle, and put them into your damage zone face up. Okay, so already that sounds like we're going to be doing some shenanigans. And recovering cards from the drop zone seems definitely extremely useful. That's definitely a void that has not been filled by many cards in Angel Feather in general. All of your front row units get power plus 10 until the end of your turn for each normal unit put, and this unit gets drive plus 1 until the end of turn for each trigger unit put. My goodness. So it's sounding like you can get up to 6 drive with this card if your drop zone is all properly set up. And then of course after you put the cards in your damage zone, you choose a card in your damage zone for each card put and heal it. So pretty standard stuff there. The great part about that is that you don't have to get cards from deck. So that means you're not going to deck yourself out by using this card, except of course for the fact that it does get the drive. So I guess in that regard it does put you closer to decking out. But one of the issues with Angel Feather and Premium has been the susceptibility to decking out. Decking out is pretty much a guarantee, all but guaranteed for Angel Feather and Premium, sadly, because of how fast we're cycling through the deck, how much we're damage checking during our main phase and battle phase. That's just inherent in terms of what Angel Feather does in Premium. But this card, oh my goodness, so versatile. Just reading mainly this part, mainly the choose up to a total of 3 cards from your drop in your circles other than Vanguard Circle. I think that alone just makes it extremely versatile. It allows you to either choose cards on your circles to put in the damage zone to work around locked cards, because if you guys don't know already, locked cards that are locked on circles those circles are still considered circles, but they're not rearguard circles anymore. They become locked circles. but because this card just says circles and it says cards, it doesn't say units, because locked cards are not considered units. You can still actually put those locked cards into your damage zone in order to free up those rearguard circles for cards that you can actually finally call to those circles. So it does work extremely well around decks like Link Joker. And then the fact that you can also choose cards from your drop zone. This card's very important here. I do want to make sure to emphasize this. The fact that you can choose cards from your drop zone means that we can efficiently recover all the pieces that we went through throughout the game. Potentially, if we went through a couple of Yophiels early on and we haven't seen the other copies of Yophiel that we needed, then we can put Yophiel back in the damage zone, then get it back to our hand by No-Seal or another card like Zaphkiel that gets cards from damage zone to hand. And then from there, we can finally use Yophiel's skill to once again damage check ourselves and then go +1 at the end of the turn. So I think that's extremely useful. I'm really excited to be able to use that synergy because, again, I think Yophiel is one of the best grade 1s that Angel Feather has in Premium right now. So definitely seeing the synergy with Yophiel and Zaphkiel here. And then also the fact that this can give all your front row units +10 for each normal unit put. So obviously Yophiel is a normal unit, so if you do that, if you go that route, then you're going to get the +10 to your front row. Now, I do want to point out here that the front row units, all your front row units here, just means the current front row units that you have upon using Zaphkiel's skill. It does not mean that any front row unit that you call for the rest of the turn is going to get +10. Unfortunately, that is like a downside to this part of the skill. However, I do think that if you have your Hamuels locked and loaded, there should be no problem with having the front row +10, because you can easily set up your front row to be whatever pieces that you need in order to build some strong columns before you activate Zaphkiel's skill. That way your opponent has to respect a potential Hamuel activation with either Denial Griffin or has to have a lot of shield prepared and ready. Otherwise, they're going to be in huge trouble. And then, of course, this is the part that I think makes the card insane, right? If you're using this card early on in your stride lines, let's say your first or second stride, then you're getting drive +6 potentially if your drop zone's properly set up. Now that part I think is what's going to make this card like relatively insane. It's going to allow this to make use of all the damage checkers that we have available in Angel Feather, especially since Hamuel is still present, still legal in Premium, and I don't see Hamuel being banned in Premium, of course, but the synergy is just way too good with Hamuel and Zaphkiel. I do think that with the proper drop zone setup with like in earlier turns, such as if you're using a card like Prime Plaster, which we'll go over a little bit later, but Prime Plaster is a grade 1 PG that was released in V series, and when it's when it's placed on the Vanguard circle, so basically when it's your grade 1 red target, you're able to draw 1 card, then discard 1 card. And the fact that you can discard 1 card early on means that you're a little bit closer to getting that very explosive Zaphkiel turn on your first stride if you wanted to. So you can discard, like, let's say, a Thundershock Angel critical trigger, or you could even discard a draw PG if you wanted to, just to flex on them. And discarding a draw PG is very interesting, because then when you use Zaphkiel's skill, you'll be able to get the draw PG into the damage zone for later use with Firmament Grants, which is our new G Guardian that we'll go over a little bit later, but this is Firmament Grants. But basically, I do think that Zaphkiel is just extremely versatile. It's going to be amazing for Angel Feather and Premium. And there's an argument to running her for first stride or second stride. The things I've been thinking about right now is to run her actually second stride most of the time. I still like Gavril Eden as a first stride just because she works so well with Hamuel and Muriel, because she has the rescue ability on top of being able to call cards from damage zone on your attack. So it's a way of playing around a potential Denial Griffin deck. Now, of course, it does depend. Sometimes that kind of play should be saved for later, especially if you know you're playing against a deck that has Denial Griffin plays. I do think that it's worth doing Zaphkiel first stride in such a case, just in case, like, you want to basically bait out their Denial Griffins early on, and then have a better, let's say, Ultima or Blast of Sail turn later. So I do think that there's some considerations there, but also Gavril Eden again allows you to just go super plus. If we use Muriel with Gavril Eden as your Vanguard, you'll be able to get the Muriel bounce at the end of the turn, which allows you to use your hard ones per turn damage check whatever you bounce next turn. Amazingly plus from that, especially if you're calling Zaphkiel off of Muriel. That's a +2, and then the subsequent turn another plus when you use Zaphkiel again. So basically +3 off of the Muriel Gavril Eden interaction. So I still think that Gabriel Eden as a first stride is extremely valuable, and especially if you don't have the proper setup in your drop zone of 3 triggers by the time you get to your first stride. I do think it's worth still running Gabriel Eden just for that first stride option. But Zaphkiel is flat out amazing. Definitely going to be my go-to mid-game stride from here on out, and I'm excited that Bushiroad's been is not afraid to give Angel Feathers good cards without making them broken. Just push them up from their previous spot in the premium metagame. But as I mentioned earlier, I do think Angel Feather is actually not that bad in premium right now, especially with the build that I presented a couple weeks ago in the deck profile. But yeah, let's go ahead and talk about some ratios here quickly. So I do think that with all that I just said, Gabriel Eden can definitely be cut to 2 copies, just because we're not really trying to use her more often. We do need to make room for the 3 Zaphkiel, that's the number that I'm feeling right now. It gives you at least a little bit of flexibility in terms of how often you want to use it per game, and just in case you don't use it that often, because Zaphkiel doesn't actually flip for cost any card in your G zone, you can just flip herself for other cards cost, such as Raphael Mitra, because you're probably not going to be using 3 Zaphkiels in a single game. I feel like 3 is definitely the upper limit, but 1 to 2 is probably the amount that you're going to be using it in any given game. So I definitely feel like making space for 3 of this card is the right thing to do. And let's go ahead and talk about Firmament Grants before we get too off track. I did want to just mention that point about ratios though. So Firmament Grants is the new G Guardian that Angel Feather is going to get. Let's go ahead and read it. It's a very short skill, but very strong. Sometimes just having a few number of words is a testament to how strong a card is. Let's go ahead and read Yu-Gi-Oh! Anyway, when this unit is put on Guardian Circle, cost Counterblast 3 and Soul Blast 1. Choose a card from your damage zone and call it to Guardian Circle. Oh my goodness. Like, this card is just insane. There's not really much to it, right? And it seems like such a basic card at first glance, but the fact that this actually calls from damage zone and is an inherent heal, just insane. I do think Angel Feather has plenty of cards that can really benefit from this. I'm going to go over them here quickly. I do think you need to save this Counterblast for this card because it is a hefty cost of Counterblast 3, but the Counterblast 3 isn't actually that big of a deal for Angel Feather most of the time, especially because we have numerous ways of inherently countercharging throughout our turns, both on our own turn and on our opponent's turn. Thanks to Grade 1 Nociel, which I do want to talk about more once we get to the end of the video where we're going to present the deck list for these ideas. I do think Grade 1 Nociel is actually going to become even more important with Firmament Grants in mind, just because the ability to swap during your opponent's turn, like when you place in the Guardian Circle. Of course, we're still running OG Gabriel, meaning we're going to get the +2 to front row, but also we're going to be able to net countercharge after we swap, because the card we swap into does not have to be face up, it can be face down. And the card we're putting into damage zone is actually going to be face up. So again, the synergies are just amazing with Firmament Grants, so the Counterblast 3 is not going to be that big of a deal. However, I am a little concerned about the Soul Blast, so eventually I might consider, I might reconsider Sartail if I feel like Soul Blast might become a problem. But in my testing with the current build I have for Angel Feathers and Premium, Soul is never a problem at all. Now, of course, this card does cost Soul, and there's like 4 other cards at most that even use Soul in the first place, so that might change. But in general, I do think that the cost is actually not as hefty as it might sound at first glance. At the same time, though, you do have to be careful about how you use your Counterblast on your own turn. In terms of if you're going for Hamiel or Basasail, you got to make sure that you are able to either unflip those damage right away, like if you use Basasail's Axe skill CB4 Guard Restrict, then you got to make sure you can CB those enough, or you got to make sure that you can take enough damage where Firmament Grants goes back into range. But again, I don't think it's going to be a huge deal because we have just so many ways of inherent countercharging with Angel Feather. And let's talk more about the actual specifics of Firmament Grant's skill. Notice how it is call a card from damage zone to Guardian Circle. We have plenty of cards that still proc their auto abilities when placed on Guardian Circle, no matter from where they are placed. Cards such as our PGs from V Series, the Draw PG, of course, every single Draw PG from V Series triggers their auto ability, their PG ability that is, from anywhere. It doesn't matter from where they're placed as long as they're placed in the Guardian Circle, as well as our Grade 1 PGs from V Series. And the one of note that we're going to be talking about here is Prime Plaster. So Prime Plaster is, you know, standard grade 1 PG, right? It just has the PG ability when placed from anywhere. And this extra ability to when placed, draw a card and discard a card. Again, it works with Zaphkiel, right? But the reason why we're using this as well is because we don't really want to run draw PGs in our deck for the Angel Feather build that we're running. We want to run a lot of crits because, again, we're trying to support hand meal, right? So as long as we have a PG that still functions like in the same manner conceptually, we're okay with not having to run draw PGs in particular, as long as it's the same function of a PG from anywhere. And of course that flexibility makes Firmament Grants just a lot stronger. And notice how it does not say that you have to call a face-up card from your G-Zone. You can call any card from your G-Zone, or as I said G-Zone, from your damage zone. You can call any card from your damage zone. So the card you counterblast, you should very much call the card you counterblast for the cost, just so that you're saving up in that regard. And note that if you're using No Seal, you can use No Seal to, before you go into this G-Guardian, you can use No Seal to put a PG from your hand into the damage zone, such as Prime Plaster or a draw PG. Then you get the Heal Guardian in your hand, you discard the Heal Guardian for your G-Guardian cost, then that's when you play Firmament Grants. And then you're going to counterblast a PG as well as 2 other cards that you have in your damage zone. And then you're going to call a PG from damage zone, and then you're going to discard another card. And that way you're able to get like a lot out of just this card in general, as well as all the other defensive utility that Angel Feather has. I feel like this card is definitely going to make Angel Feather extremely hard to kill if they weren't already, which, you know, again, I think Angel Feather is just one of the strongest defensive clans, and this is not going to be any exception in that regard. And note that the guard from damage zone is also a way of navigating around guard restrict. That way we're able to, as I mentioned, if you're stuck against a clan that's like, oh, a 4 or more guard restrict, well, no, you don't have to worry about a 4 or more guard restrict, since we have this card that can allow us to PG from damage zone and heal a card. It's actually just insane. And the fact that we're healing a card is also like more room to take damage for OG Gavrail's Generation Break 2, which, you know, each time a card is put in our damage zone, our front row gains plus 2k. So there's just so much like synergy, so much that makes this deck just really hard to kill. And I think Firmament Grants and Zaphkiel are going to both accomplish that really well together as the new additions for Angel Feather and Premium. So yeah, I think that's all there is to say about these 2 cards. I did want to point out that most of the time you probably wouldn't want to go into this more than twice per game, and that'll be reflected in the deck list that I'm about to show. But I did want to point that out, as I did with Zaphkiel in terms of the ratio that we're running her at. But yeah, let's go ahead and go into the actual deck list that I have in mind. So this is the build that I basically wanted to showcase in terms of like highlighting the new toys that Angel Feather can play with now. And it's mostly the same, like the main deck is mostly the same build as the build I showed in the deck profile a couple weeks ago. Of course, we're still running the double V-Series Gavrail and the double OG Gavrail, as well as the 4 hand meal. And then the rest of the main deck is mostly the same as well, especially the grade 2 line looking exactly the same. The grade 1s and the triggers are kind of different. This is actually a trigger lineup I've been using lately though. It's not the trigger lineup that I had exactly in the deck profile, but basically the idea is that we have the over trigger because anytime you guard with the over trigger, anytime you see the over trigger in your hand other than getting off a trigger check, you're able to get it back into the damage zone with Zaphkiel, and then you can either swap it into your hand with No Seal here, or you can actually guard with this with Firmament Grants. So we can basically loop that over and over with Zaphkiel Firmament Grants, as long as we are able to continue to get this from drop zone into damage zone. So I think it's still worth running the over trigger as a means of not only the defensive value of the 50k shield, but also, I mean, over triggers are just broken. 100 million is not enough said there. And this specific over trigger, by the way, the reason we're running this over the Amartanoa over trigger, which is the Keter Sanctuary over trigger, the double 100 mil allows both your rearguard columns to just be immensely more threatening than having the extra drive checks. I feel like the drive checks we don't particularly need for this deck, especially since we're decking out very quickly even without those extra drive checks on the rearguards. So I don't really like the Amartanoa over trigger. And the double 100 mil again forces your opponent to have the answer. We're running a lot of crits here, so if they don't have the answer, which is the PG, then they're in huge trouble. They're taking a lot of damage. They're taking 2 to 3 damage off of those attacks. So again, I think this Overtrigger is actually super underrated for Angel Feather, but I'm sure you guys already know this from having watched my deck profile video. And then in the grade 1 lineup, as you can see, we're still running the 4 Zaphkiel and the 3 Zaphkiel, but here we've got Prime Plaster instead of course Arakiba. Arakiba was just a placeholder anyway, but Prime Plaster, as I talked about earlier, is basically our go-to ride target if we're thinking about trying to get Zaphkiel as our first ride, because we were able to cycle right away when she's placed on the Vanguard circle. And then of course she's also a PG that works from anywhere. And we're still running the Nakir. Now notice how this is 3 copies of Nakir instead of the 1 copy that I had in the deck profile. I've been running 3 ever since actually releasing that video, and that's only because I cut down Clearview Angel to 1 copy instead of 2 copies. I feel like you actually need to run multiple copies of this, and I noticed that in my hand test video that it looked a little weird running 1 copy of this but always opening it in my hand test. So I definitely want to up this to 3 copies just to emphasize the fact that having this card early on really allows you to have more flexibility in terms of which ride you're going into. Sometimes your opponent might like staying on grade 2 or whatever, which is not a good idea for them, but in that case, if you went second, you need to adjust and find this OG Gavrail, V-Series Gavrail as soon as you can, which is what Nakir can accomplish. And plus the fact that Nakir discards is like, yes, we're discarding for Zaphkiel, you know? So I think Nakir being able to discard something like a Hamiel or literally anything in our deck makes Zaphkiel even more hilarious, because we can, like, for example, discard a trigger. That way we can get the 6 drive checks on the Zaphkiel. And because the trigger is back in the damage zone, we can get that trigger back with Refros. Speaking of Refros, oh my goodness. Refros is going to be even more broken with Zaphkiel now in the game. Refros allowing us to get the triggers back from the drop zone to the damage zone, and then we use Refros to get those triggers back in the deck. Oh my goodness, like early game, mid game, Refros, seeing a Refros early on is just going to have amazing value, and you know, I do want to make sure we take advantage of that with the build that we have here. Notice how I'm running 3 no-seal instead of 2 here. I want to double down on the fact that we're able to swap during the opponent's turn, not just for the proc on OG Gavrail, but also to unflip damage and get defensive pieces in the damage zone as we would like. And it just allows us to have more flexibility in terms of you know, putting a card that we can call from damage zone off of Firmament Grants, or just putting a card that we can use next turn to call from the damage zone. I often like doing that I often like doing a no-seal to put Hamiel in the damage zone, and then getting a high defensive value card such as a Sentinel Crit or a Thundershock Angel, for example, into my hand. And that way we're just able to, again, survive more. We don't really need Hamiel in our hand most of the time. We can put in the damage zone pretty safely and then call off of the OG Gavrail Stride bonus. So I think no-seal is actually extremely good at 2 copies. At 2 or more copies, pardon me. And I want to double down on this because of the Firmament Grants edition. So I did like 3 copies of this when I was testing it out. But again, it is a little risky because you don't really want to see this early game, or it's not like a terrible card early game, but you like, riding is not the best. But it turns out actually that if you ride this and you Soul Blast it off of something like Zaphkiel, you can actually still get it back with Zaphkiel's skill, which again, I think the fact that Zaphkiel exists is what makes this deck like a lot more flexible, a lot more, it allows things to be broken up into whatever combo lines that you really want to do, because you just have more flexibility in terms of recovering cards from your drop zone to your damage zone. And we're using Clearview for that, but obviously Clearview takes up main deck space, and I'm sure as I'm sure you guys might know, in Yu-Gi-Oh, running the extra deck version of a card is a lot better than running the main deck version of a card if they can do relatively similar things. So having the Zaphkiel that can recover cards from drop zone and damage zone in the G zone really frees up our deck space. So that's why I think it's fine to run 3 copies of no-seal. If we happen to ride this, then we can still get it back from the Soul into the drop zone, and then the drop zone into the damage zone later on. And then notice that we're still running the Muriel starter. As I mentioned before, I think Gavrail Eden as a first ride is still fine, especially given that we can go really plus off of our Gavrail Eden turns, and our drop zone might not be set up quite for a Zaphkiel to have 6 drive checks. So I do think it's still fine to run the Muriel. Not to mention that if Muriel gets retired, it can be used as like retire bait, basically. Oftentimes opponents that can retire, they will retire your starter because they're like, oh, you're running a Forerunner starter and you'd have no protection for it. Let me just go ahead and get rid of that, thank you very much. So they'll likely do that on Muriel. And remember that Zaphkiel can recover from the drop zone, so it's no problem that they do that. If they do that, then we can put Muriel in the damage zone, and then later on, if we wanted to go into Gabriel Eden afterwards, then we can use Gabriel Eden and call the, or not call the Muriel. We can stride into Gabriel Eden, then we can use OG Gabriel's stride bonus to call the Muriel, and then we can use Muriel's skill, put her in the soul, call something else, then we can be able to bounce that afterwards. But of course, that's not as good going into mid and late game, but it is still pretty nice. Like, you could technically call a trigger unit, and then it bounces at the end of your turn, so it's like a shield value as well. So not the worst actually, and especially since some of our trigger units, like Munkar here, is actually a 5k power card. The rest of these, I believe, are 4k or some sort. Oh, that's 5k as well. But regardless, as you can see, like, calling some of these trigger units isn't the worst off of Muriel actually, because once it bounces, then it becomes a card that you can guard with the subsequent turn. And then more about the G zone. I did want to mention that notice how we're running 6 G Guardians here. We're running 2 of the Firmament Grants, 1 Power Shell still, and 3 Suriel. So I don't really like Elolith in this deck anymore, just because I feel like Firmament Grants can do a lot more with the same like counterblast or same like face-up damage basically. Because Elolith is only really good when you have 2 to 3 face-up damage. It gives you like an extra 5k shield for each face-up card in your G zone, or not your G zone, your damage zone. And really the only time that's worth it is if you have 3 or more face-up cards. And at that point, you might as well just go into Firmament Grants, because that's when you go into Firmament Grants as well, when you have 3 face-up cards in your damage zone. So I've definitely cut Elolith for that reason. And Suriel is still an amazing card, by the way. Just the ability to find a 10k trigger, 10k defensive trigger, and get the extra +2 on OG Gabriel's GB2. Just flat out amazing. So still an amazing card. I think I'm still going to be running 3 of this for the time being. And then we still have 1 copy of Power Shell, just because the situations where it does come up is just a lot of value. You get a 1 card potential 35k shield. So, but of course it's very situational. So still just the 1 copy. But when it does come up, it's fantastic. And then we've got 3 Zaphkiel, I talked about already, why we're running 3 Zaphkiel. I don't think you need 4, just because it doesn't G-flip or anything, so 3 is perfectly fine. We're still running the 2 copies of Basasail, just because we do need to have some semblance of finishing in this deck, and the ability to kind of lengthen the game out with the amount of damage necessary to lose is still pretty nice. And then we're still running a small Raphael package. I don't think you'll ever go into these Raphael cards, especially now that we have Zaphkiel here, but Raphael's there just to give us some mental comfort. And then, of course, 2 Gabriel Eden as our first ride option. But yeah, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope these ideas hopefully inspired you to now pick up Angel Feather Premium. I do think this deck is actually a lot stronger than people give it credit. And I hope that in your experimentations and the ideas I presented in this video, that you have a chance to really think about what Angel Feathers can do in this current metagame. So yeah, with that, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.